Okay. We're live here. Well, I'm going to go and devote this episode to what it says on the PGO here, the picture. It is about why every gunshot victim should be able to drive a car. So that's why every gunshot victim should be able to drive a car. Independence, opportunity, access to care, a chance to move forward. Mobility is recovered, gives survivors the keys to a better future, and not giving someone else the keys to the future by handing them the house. Right. So let's talk about it. Let's go down the list of why gunshot victims should be able to drive. Okay. So, whoa. Why in the first place? Did you miss yesterday's episode about the same principled thing, which was about God is not the answer to a gunshot? Okay. So, we live in a system that is perpetual. It is dependent on one being, a being that is, suffice to say, an answer, an interruption, a reason to live in a new hopeful mind, yes, but one that is forgetful, one that is tangible at something you will never grab in your entire life because you do not share physical information with them. It is as simple as that. So I'm going to go down the list, and you may disagree, and you may agree, but go watch the other live, and you'll go and agree if God can sim a victim of a gunshot wound. Okay, so here we go, and we will go on to the moment ability, the thinking skill, the pattern of why a gunshot victim should be able to drive. I'm not saying as soon as they get shot, but maybe a year down the line, maybe 2 years down the line, maybe 3 years down the line, should they be able to drive? Or why is there a question about that? Because it's a real life question. We're not all kids here. We're not all, living in, a suburban based prison in solitary confinement. And we're not all saying, hey, everybody can drive, everybody can do everything. We all owned no electronics. So I'm here, watch TV daily, and I can clearly see it. Not everyone has a medical professional that will do the dirty deed for them, which is to suffice. What they have said is, please write this on a piece of paper. I was a gunshot wound victim, and I was having some sort of episodic reasoning. I was having some sort of supportive addiction. But then they might say, barely, because I was a gunshot victim. And then another guy might come in and say, I was a gunshot victim twice. So there you are. There's no really green thumb about it. Your body puts the poison in, and it withdraws the other poison. You put it in again, and it lessens. So let's take a look at the list I've made here. Obviously, you can't see it, I think, right? But I'm not going to show it anyways. So I'll read it out loud. No gunshot victim should be left for dead. I think that's an agreeable memento. No gunshot victim should ever be left alone to fend for themselves in a bad situation. It is irrevocable, right? There's no reason a gunshot victim should die. So let's go on to the next question of don't scratch it off the list. Don't forget about the gunshot victim. Obviously, we go to the next question. But I mean, if we tune into the first one, we'll go back to it. No gunshot victim should be left alone. So, I mean, I think perceptively, yeah. I mean, in a way, figuratively, not really. There's a fake words for real pictures, right? You have to experience something to make sure it's real, right? You are talking to a gunshot victim and you're going to say, I don't really believe you. And kind of like the sideway face and kind of say like, hey, you need to check in. But think about it the other way. You're the gunshot victim or you're a survivor of gun violence. You're like, oh, I can be there for you. Or your first responder would say, hey, hi, why don't I help you? Or why not we go down the line of time and say, hey, why don't I help you? So every day, let's ask yourselves, is there a sporadic shooting that is disorganized, right? And I'll say, yeah, there's a sporadic shooting that is disorganized almost weekly, right? There's a kid who took a gun to the school down the street, and there's a kid that went down the other street over there, and that street over there, and that town over there, and they shut up a fucking school. And they said, yeah, that pretty much happened. And it was all sporadic, disorganized, and no one really knew what to do at the time. Everyone was distracted. I don't think it was drugs. And then they said, they shut up the school. And they're like, oh, that was bad. You're in trouble. That kid's dead, or those people over there are dead and wasn't a school. But the reality is, like, should you leave the victim alone? Should you leave the victim sporadic? Should you leave the victim's feelings sporadically? Right. But the question there is there a right or wrong? Is there a right or wrong? So think about, who are you talking to? Who are you asking this question for? Who are you saying is the gunshot victim? Why would it necessarily matter in the moment of a mass media relationship to the news as a shooting? Is that what it's called? Yeah, that's what it's called. We don't pick masses versus picking masses. It's a trick question, right? You're tricking yourself into believing that there is nothing, that there is something, that there is a skill to something that is heavier, that is lighter, right? Like if you took a feather and you dropped, something at the same time, like a washer, the situation, which one goes to the bottom first? I forget, right? So the point is not about the memento of distraction, of distress, of disorientation, or detachment, I suppose, but the probability, or what I would consider the probable cause, right? Or the it's not the probable cause, it's the tuning in to the situation. Do you get left alone? Somewhat. Do you get left, forward thinking? Are you there with someone? Yeah. You should always be there with someone because you should have a buddy system. There's one thing you should have, right? There's another thing. You should not be a victim in the future. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at, the big picture, but can you make a lesson out of a big picture? And there's a very big precaution there of mass media, the attention of a killer, of a shooter, of a victim. And, the reality of, okay, if the mass shooting is going this way and the victim is here and the, let's say the killer is right here, and they say, we're going to trust the mass hysteria to kind of go divide, but where does the attention go? Where does it sink into? It sinks into war, epidemic, the reality of hope. But yet again, it dips into money, it dips into the option of fear, emotion, reality. So you got to think, not with addictions, not with the gunshot should be left alone to go to the group meeting and say, I have addictions, right? You shouldn't say that. You should say, you're a victim. Well, you're sort of a victim in the right way. There's the right way and there's the wrong way. But then there's the victimhood, right? You did something wrong. You fretted in your mind for such a long time, and now you're coming to the realization you left some sort of evidence out. And it doesn't mean you're right. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean, you're absolutely, forbidden from anything, talking to you. But it doesn't mean that you're not an idea. That's one thing. You should never be an idea. You're a victim. You circle that one out. You're a victim of a massacre. And I think that's the word we're looking for, massacre, not a mass shooting. So let's go on to the next one, right? And I'll raise my hand and read the fifth. I swear to tell the truth, everything for the truth, and nothing but the truth, right? So let's go, and just me, I will go to the next one and I'll say, hey, this is the YouTube live. Nobody's watching. And, you come to this, idea that says, I win the whole conversation, right? I'm joking, right? So you're the viewer out of everywhere that says, I can watch and do everything. So let's go to the next question here. I'll just shout it out. Every gunshot victim should have a crime scene. Yes or no? Should every gunshot victim have a crime scene that applies to them? Mostly. I mean, if the victim is really there and that person really worked for someone who investigates crimes and observes crime scenes, technically, I mean, if it was out of the ordinary, someone viewed it and it was a crime scene itself and no one was there to go take it down, I guess kind of like The Wire. You ever watch that show about reporters who are like cops? Forget about it. But there we go. I mean, the crime scene is technically real. For an animal, is it real? I mean, yeah. In certain circumstances, the animal should be protected no matter what. Even in a farmyard, they should always be protected, right? But people, what about people who are disabled mentally? Well, yes and no, right? We could say they're kind of like slaves in a way, but they don't have the same rights as other humans, right? Unless, if we worked it out as human beings in a commitment of, focus, attention, reality, self-perception is one of them. Do they know right from wrong? Do they know their emotions, their buildup of thoughts and ideas, all build up to the significant factors of what they want from their emotions, right? And it's not about slavery, being who you are versus a who you are, right? It's about the anticipate of creating a fortune, right? If or what's it called, peace, right? So there are easy ways and there are harder ways, and then there is normal ways which are just only normal, right? So when you ask yourself, your gunshot victim, and did you have a crime scene before, would you say yeah or no, or would you say I don't know? What about then? How do you generalize that statement? How do you put it into something or words that you could understand, you could talk about? If you are the gunshot victim, should you teach other gunshot victims to survive? Should you talk about the crime scene you experienced? Should you, as a police officer, if you experience a gunshot victim's crime scene, supposed, would you talk about? Would you believe in the factors of generalizing statements? What about generalizing statements you don't know? What about the ideas you don't have? What if you were a detective and you did the same exact thing? What if you were a PI? What if you were a reporter and you talked about it? What if one of them was about the higher power? What was it about? You have a victim statement. You have an eloping fact about the law, and the discipline of law is based on, you have to say, it's about far-reaching fact that is farther reaching than anything else before, and you're creating and what's it called? The word is always slipping your mind. It's it's a reason. It's almost like a reason, but it's an improvement that you can make with your perception, right? So you, as someone with a crime scene, is creating an endearment that's generalized, and you're making more generalized statements over and over and over and over again because you're a victim. You're a victim of crime, the mentality of crime, the reasoning of crime, the discipline of crime, the hypothetical setting of crime, the situation of the crime, and then the start of the crime itself, right? And it might be ambiguous, right, as a word is, but it might be crime is a setting as a factor, right? That is a universal tone, and so therefore universal order. That means that anything can happen at any time, sort of, right? It means that any universal crime or mentality of sociological need or the horizon of the crime, such as being a gunshot victim itself, and it doesn't need to be an apparent one. You could have accidentally shot yourself, is an apparent crime upon a universal notion of a generality. Still, however, but the generality of the universal notion itself is disproven by the, and we use the word conclusive as a way of putting it as well, is written or it's applied to the ethics or applied to the standards of the generality in a novice, right? But far from it. Everyone should have a crime scene somehow, but you wouldn't really necessarily bring it up in language either. So if you didn't really leave the conversation well and you said, yeah, I was a victim of a gunshot wound, but don't really know much about the crime scene, and you brought it up with a therapist, a psychologist, a professor, a doctor, a PhD winning prize Emmy award mediation star, or something else in that order, right? You're following the form of ethics that you should as a human, right? I believe so. You can grasp everything in your mind: a newspaper, a stethoscope, your skin, the phone, and then question your doctor, right? But then the idea of a therapist, it's not always so open and close, somewhat, but it is still a technological improvement based on the reality of your self-insurance or self-assurance, right? But the probability is all tangible, right? So one bigger, one smaller, one bigger, but one bigger than one nothing, right? If nothing, then something smaller, or something smaller and then everything, right? So there is an imperative right there that is creating a loop, right? You're slowly turning away from the situation. You're slowly getting better in the situation, but slowly you start to realize that when everything goes with you, you leave the situation you're in. And that's the same exact thing for a crime scene. You're leaving the situation over and over and over again, just like chemical bonds, basically. You're leaving the situation, but it's practically your choice is only partial of the evidence, partial of the reason, partial of the conclusive reason. right? It's not about the supportive conclusion. It's not about the supportive means to make a conclusion. It's about the supportive abstract thinking that is reality for you, as it is your focus, your attention. In psychology, that is maybe besides the detachment in theory, but it's your self-purpose as your self, distinguishment, your self-choice, your self-emotion, right? Everything you build for is things you need and want, and so on. So when you have a crime scene, you have something that is frictionful. You're creating an action, you're creating a choice, an openness, an exertiveness that creates the propulsion from one thinking skill to not only two, but multiple reasons. And we don't use numbers for them. We use multiple reasons as it is just a way to kind of shortening the infinite span of your emotion or your realities, right? So let's go down more of the list as I'm speaking to absolutely no one. It is critical theory about blank, about the idea about something that is no name, that has no answer, and that has no reality whatsoever, and has, apparently, according to modern theory, in fact, no solution. So let's go to the next one. We were just over no gunshot victim should be left for dead. No gunshot victim should be left alone. No gunshot victim should have, or every gunshot victim, my apologies, every gunshot victim should be left alone. And there's another one I could type down, which is every gunshot victim has a voice, right? So let's go to the next one, or a quote, or a single quote, if we must, right? And we'll define that eventually. So every gunshot victim should have a crime scene. And then now we go to, let me just write the last one we were just talking about, a voice. Every gunshot victim should have fair rights. Whoa, that's even better than the voice. That's better than the quick statement in which we shared the relationship to about the gunshot victims and why. Of course, they should drive cars, have fair rights. They should have equal rights to vote. They should have equal rights to do a lot of things. I mean, that is a breaking ethic there. Who gets to decide who is a bad gunshot victim, who's a good gunshot victim? Who gets to decide who the gunshot victim should be? Should they be the one that wakes up the same exact emotion in their mind as the young adult who's breaking from the ego of their parents, of the self-repertoire of their textbook, of their livelihood, right? What you bring with you is your package for life, is your backpack for life. It is your plan for life, and it tells you a lot about who you are. Your voice is one of those things, right? So should every gunshot victim have fair rights? And we put in, should they have fair rights to drive a car? Makes sense to me. But what about the opposite, questioner? The reason in which, somebody might say, hey, officer, that man's insane. And he has a gunshot victim, idea, or he has the reality of testing the moment in which he thought was another gunshot victim. Or he said, oh, you've said something interrogative, or interrogative, I suppose, not in theory and fact, or not in traditional psychology as a word of torture, but he's basically, he's threatening me. He's threatened me about the idea about being a gunshot victim less. And I'll give you an example, right? You pick one gunshot victim versus the next gunshot victim, but the other gunshot victim, the bullet never existed. And where we've heard this one before, Squid Injures kind of was covered in the last story, the last live. But there's more. What about the gunshot victim who was only a percentage of the gunshot victims? I mean, would you figure, somebody who was a gunshot victim make a Quartel joke? Maybe. But the real, scenario there is everything is split into differences. No human is matter. No human is matter. No human is numbers. But percentages, like, you're going to have to look at the big picture, the keys. The ideas that fit each little piece together in a program and kind of develop the sense. But so we're thinking about it, right? So we're thinking, if a gunshot victim can't truly drive and they truly have these fair rights and they are truly unbelievable in this story, or a percentage of the story, or their frequency, their mindset is too elusive, it's too inaccurate, it's disappropriate, right? They spend too much money, they have too many ideas that aren't theirs, they believe in something that should be far off from what they should be doing. They shouldn't believe in that at all. But the reality is They should have fair rights. They should have even odds. They should have existential reasons to do their practice. Their ideas should be the same as anyone else's. They should not be left in a different category. They are not human slaves. Absolutely. Gunshot victims are not human slaves. I'll say it there. But I do know, and I do argue myself, what if that person no longer was a gunshot victim? What if in the world we live in, all photographs, all footage, all reasons to believe that they were a gunshot victim, all pictures, all textbooks were wiped? There was no gunshot victim, and they're just saying, they're complaining it. They're lying about being a gunshot victim, and I don't think you should believe them whatsoever, and they shouldn't drive a car. They're a gunshot victim. So what would you say then if somebody came to you and said that? But they said it in a nuanced way, and you're starting to learn a language here about, is it desperation? Is it about cancer? Is it about the ritual itself of some sort of far off emotion? Is it about human empathy? Is it about human success, human reason to live, right? So if the gunshot victim came in high one day, yeah, I could suppose maybe it looked like, you were somewhat high. What about the opposite fact? The gunshot victim looked down at themselves and said, well, yeah. Or what if they said, oh, no, I've been through so much. I've been a gunshot victim. And they lose it and they say, well, the memento is in the conversation. They levy the conversation to say, leave you with one statement, which is the imperative, right? The imperative of the conversation, it's not the focus of the attention. It's not the arte of the attention. It is about the reason to live, which is live, or let live. Live and let live, right? Let the emotion go. Let the true fact of saving someone's life be an endurance, right? Be the endeavor of life, not the far out focus of what you want to do. What you dream about doing is maybe saving someone's life, but the far out emotion is here and now. What you can do now is what is important, not the question about, the last episode. God is the one who saves people from the gunshot wounds. I don't believe we have solved this question still. And I believe we went over that paradigm, that existential reason of the delusion, right? But look at the reality of what you're saying. So there is gun and there is God. There's a car, transportation, the need of transportation, a fair right. And then there is a gunshot wound and a victim, a survivor of a mass casualty, if you have to put it that way. Or there's the massacre survivor, the one who grew up. No, we don't say massacre like that because we go back to the traditional word. Massacre is a word of now. We look down 200 centuries ago or 2 centuries ago, you find that the massacre is the ideendum. It is the reference. This is the witch hunt burning you down. It is the question that is relevant. It is like the word concept, right? You look at massacre. There is a massacre. There is a revelation of a massacre. There is a privilege to see the massacre. There is a reason to distort the massacre, right? So when you look at mass shooting or the killings of the others, the killings of the supportive reason, right? The killings of no one but someone who's unsophisticated. They don't know the taste of a killing. They don't know the murderer who is, right? They don't know what privilege is to go back in time and say, hey, I walked through the crime scene and I said to myself, I was a gunshot victim once. But, I don't take that story with me. I don't go tell people I went back to the scene of the crime. Thank you very much. But I also did say we don't do that as humans, as witches, to scare people. Right? We've decided a long time ago to let live, let live, right? So the principle there is to create a fair share of emotion, community building, community strength, community reason to live, right? They're primitive words. They're non-primitive words. They're declusive, right? They're not words that are normal. They're not ringing bells. They're not absolute questions anymore because they're time. They're versions of a story that don't collusively go together, but they should have fair rights at all times. But they should be traditional in a way, obviously, as though the mediation is traditional. I mean, yeah, it depends on what type of traditional medium you believe in, media you believe in. But the fairness is about the community still finding some sort of situation that is imperative, right? You're finding a reality behind what you need to do, which is safekeeping, which is finding a reality towards what you're trying to support in the whole entirety, right? So let's go over some of the other questions, and they are relative because there was no answer to that question. Should or should gunshot victims have fair rights? And then we go, yeah, absolutely. And they give an imperative, a paradox, and then a reason, but no one ever thinks about the future in the question. No one ever thinks about the reason and why that person wasn't safe to begin with, right? The culture shocks, their culture revelations, cultural and social empathy, points and choice and collateral, right? They're collateral because you have something to start with and something that does not exist for a good reason, right? That's a paradox to you right now. But what about the paradox that says, all of your emotion is built upon the safety or the stake in which you have ownership, right? And that's the question about the fair ethic there, right? Just because it's a fair ethic doesn't mean it is a fair right. It doesn't mean it's not a paradox by itself, but it also means that's a shattered reality, right? Hiding your ideas. You might consider hiding salvation. You might consider concern with ethic, but look at the reality there. There is a case and a question to saying who gets to eat last? Who gets to eat first? If there's no food, who eats? If there's no food at all, who eats that food, right? So the question is, why lie? Why create a scenario in which two people are doing two things or one thing that they shouldn't do? And the answer there is, yes, there is a problem with the paradoxical reason or the concentration or human ethic, if you can put it that way, the choice of living, right? But the reason to live is not paradox, it is not human existence, even though it is humanities. It is about existential or reasonable clauses, peace, safekeeping, philosophy, supportive mindsets, or one of those or some of those, right? So let's go to the next question here, even though it might not make sense. Every gang shot or gunshot victim should be saved. And I mean, I can give you a minute, I can give you silence, but should every gunshot victim be saved? The question, it might take 3 minutes, it takes 5 minutes, it might take 20 minutes, but you might put a tourniquet on them. You might take their shirt off. I mean, it's sweaty out there. You might take your shirt off. You might have to do certain things to appease that gunshot victim right there on the spot. And, it might be related towards, innuendo. It might be related towards, the surprise, relationship between, it's tourniquet. It might be the relationship towards finding a supportive means towards finding a grounding for that person, right? It's a gunshot wound, and it might not get better, right? But the ethic there says it's taboo. What do you do if you get shot? Then who asks these questions if you get shot? No one. So the question there is not only the ethics, not only philosophy. It is the imperative again. What is made, and what is living is living. So what is made is an ontology of the other question about the imperative, which is if everything was there and there was no other reason, what is affecting the environment? What is setting the reason to believe it? And then there's the whatever is living, observation, history, right? So I mean that's sociological, that's psychological, that's all of them, right? So there is a bigger imperative there that is bases maybe needs Maslow's hierarchy of thought, fitting the whole entire picture into why does it happen in the first place? Should they be saved? Should all doctors work? Should all professors work? Should all police cops work? Should all businessmen work? Should all mothers work? Should all fathers work? Should all emergency contacts work? So it's an endless question of, who is in shock, who is in now, who's in the sane reason to save someone's life then, right? If you had no other option but to find out someone is dead, and don't say it's forsaken, right? Find its a reason to find an existence maybe in the afterlife. Bury not what you have, but what you could have, right? In the reason of now, right? If there's no sanity, there's only the same, right? If there's only dirt, there's only a change, right? So the support there might be microbiology. It might be about the entanglement of self doubt and peace. But there is a culture there, and it might be in shock, it might be in support, but it's a change for the good. So if there was one change in the world, should it be the death of someone in the future? Or should it be, the question of should the gunshot victim be able to be saved, right? Or should it be they're laid to death, right, in their grave, and then there they stood and they buried them in the ground? But then the question is of God forgiving them from the sins. That's nothing new, right? So when you look at the principle of the Bible, and we go back to it, or the significance of something like the Constitution or the revelation of like new modern texts. It doesn't mean they're new modern theories. It means that they are relatable to some sort of idea. So the principle there is, you're laid to rest. You're relating to a new set principle in a new way. Nothing has changed for the sorts. It's always a place in the significant figure. It doesn't mean it's drug addled. It doesn't mean it's supportive of drugging. And I mean, when I say drugging, I mean taking like a napkin full of chloroform over someone's face, or drugging someone's drink, right? Or, something that goes along the lines of sexual assault or murder or rape or kill or homicide, kidnapping, right? They're not inclusive, right? They're not focus attention. They're not realities that have a combining fact, right? The realities that are supportive by the means that are anthropologic, right? You're creating a way to create a statement or comparison between two things in a way, but it's counterproductive, or it's counterculture, because the supportive means, just like Erickson would say, or Ford would say, or even Young would be supportive means, but not mostly Young, would be the means of light, or the means of figurative, language. Figurative meaning like a framework, right? You're related toward the support in which you're conclusive. Right? And you'll have to look it up, because why? The framework itself is supportive by the means of its clause, like a telescope would be. Right? Like the sound you hear at sea is different from the sound you hear on Earth, right? So let's go to the next question, and I think we'll check it off as every gunshot victim should be saved. There should be a reason. There should be a support for that reason. I think we found out the other two right there, that every gunshot should have her rights. Yes. Every gunshot victim should have a crime scene. Yes, in a way. It's supportive and non-supportive. Yes. No gunshot victims should be left alone. Yes, a society says we should not leave gunshot victims alone. No gunshot victims should be left for dead. That's inconclusive. So it's also a fact and pattern, so we don't know. So let's go down. And that means it's also a usatel need, right? If you need to run from a gunshot victim, you run and you get help, right? If you run from them, you're leaving them for dead, possibly. So there's that, and there's the seclusive principle of finding the real reason, the right you have to go save and interfere with the gunshot victim. The question isn't about the fortune, it isn't about the support, it isn't about figurative language, it is about the principle in which you drove into the question. The figurative statement has nothing to do with the reality of being charted into that communication at all. When you write communication right now, you might think, hey, communication is something I can create a supportive network for, and I can grow with it. But think about communication as its own channel. When you compare it to mass media, compare it to growth or human factors, or even the libel you see in the newsprint, you see communication is always separate, always is different, or is indifferent, because it is a safe place to be. Right? You're communicating the tactile force, if you will, or the tactile strength of education, of support system, of psychological needs, and the tactical reason to touch, for feeling, for emotion, for support, for seeing color, for hearing, for thinking, for emotion itself, right? That supportive means doesn't mean you have the right to break communication. It means you have the supportive reason and right to see communication as a tactical style and a communication style for tactical. And then we go with the word again. Communication is communication. So we'll think about it like that. Communication is a layaway. Not really. Communication is now. Communication is a proven fact to be a supportive, imperative need because it is based on the reality of starting something, of nothing, of finding a fact versus fiction. Communication is a reason to live. Communication is a support system that needs a balance. It needs a disimbalance. It needs a purgio of words that are not word salad, but are words that are memorized, words that are supportive to make a means to do something, right? Without communication, you have no style, no ethic, no reason to live, no purpose. Just like a paradox, you do need communication for a paradox, but a paradox and a communication or an ethic and a concern, right? So we go back to the other question of what is not an imperative, right? So let's go to the next question, and maybe we'll review as though we aren't stricken or deprived of communication in some sort of way, because the communication itself is an ethic. So we went on to should every gunshot victim be saved? Now we go to no one should celebrate on a gunshot victim's grave or crime scene. Right away, you say, yeah. What other reason would you have to celebrate on a gunshot victim's crime scene or grave? Do the minutes matter? Do the seconds matter? Does the real reason matter of why it could take place? Could it be beyond the ritual of community or societal needs? Could it be beyond the reason of sanity? Could it be the reason beyond the significance of love, of factoring of your own support systems, maybe your childhood, your youth, of your adulthood? Could it be the reason and why you're alive? You celebrated the fact to find a novice attempt of self-sanctity, of the version of self-safety. What about the reality of being a grown-up, right? You taking the time to find yourself beyond communication, to find a grounding point, to say, this is a celebration itself, right? This is a celebration of death. This is a celebration of the emotion in which you imply your human body, your mind, your soul, your ethic, your reason to live, your supportive need to make an understanding, to compare something from something else, to find something that's new, to find a reality between choice, life, and death. What is beyond what has happened? Why didn't it get beyond a grave? Beyond the setting of a death, beyond a gunshot wound, beyond the idea of dying, right? Why give life to something that should not have a start to begin with? Why give something to someone that doesn't belong with them? If it's a gunshot wound, if it's a stabbing, if it's a mass murder, if it's a spree, if it's a kidnapping, if it's a rape, should you celebrate on the grave of someone else? And in a previous thought, you'd say, yeah. If the kidnapper or the rapist did something worse and they hurt me so bad, you still give it a moment. You say, yeah, I wouldn't have a problem celebrating on the grave. Or you would say, I wouldn't have a problem celebrating on the grave if they murdered somebody I knew. What about, I wouldn't matter to me if I celebrated on a grave and they did something bad to me more than anything else they did. And it gave me remorse. It gave me territorial gain. I want to sue them. I want to give them a court order to stay away from me. Or let's say you walked into whatever you were in and you were a gunshot victim. You saw the place was covered in blood. It was covered in red. You said, yeah, I have no problem with the emotion, the temptation I have, but somebody seduces you into the situation in which you don't believe in. Then what? Then do you become nonsensical? Do you become something beyond the turning point? And that's a whole different indifference of the turning point. What is wrong is what is right, and what is what is dead, right? What is dead is nothing. So, I mean, you could see it both ways. What is dead is nothing, and you can count to infinity about that too. But you can't count to infinity about something that's new, that's in love, that's fighting the force of what is fiction, right? You're finding a way to find something new, supportive, Not even a voice would give you that emotion, but the same supportive means. The rites would be about the ritual. Again, it would be about the supportive means defining a friction beyond something evil. A gestation beyond all bad things and good things to find some sort of temptation of neutrality. And does that make it right or wrong? Should you celebrate on the crime scene in which it's happened to a child? Would that make it right or wrong? Would it make it true love if you knew, you were the support system for that, worker, for that kid who made it all the way for those miles, or, was just walking down the street one day and turned out dead? Would it make it right or wrong? Would it be more segregated than anything? Would it be honest? Would it be a choice? Would it be a selective matter you can remember? So there are a lot of questions there of what is right or wrong, what is successful and what is non-successful, or what is the choice of love, hope, heart, or hearth, or reason to live, or support to be a reason in someone's life, or be normal, or possibly be within the choice of human setting, or maybe neutrality. You be neutral. Maybe it's your birthplace. Maybe it's your supportive network because it has no modern support system itself, and it's just in the system, right? So the supportive mean, if everything is general and everything is general, and that's an agreed upon moment, should everyone be able to do it? Should no one be able to do it, right? And I have no solution for that question. It is just like the question about asking for advice. Don't give someone advice about something they will never do or need to do because it can never exist. Is the gunshot victim now walking into the bedroom? Are they walking into the building with a gunshot wound that's healed? Are they brain damaged? Are they going to sit down and say, "Hi, I'm the gunshot victim here, and I'm one of the gunshot victims, and I'm basically I'm the support system and what you want to hear about and what you want to talk about"? Would that be different then? I'm the story of the gunshot victim. I'm giving the story of them. And basically everything is, my choice, my words, my feeling, my thought. And, nobody came to see my gunshot victim story, and I can have proof. And there's no proof you can show me that says, things will be different, but it says, hey, there's 0 views right here. And, even though you're a gunshot victim listener of a story, I don't believe you, or even your mistake about walking to a story about a gunshot victim. And I was just rushed. The imperative there is, friction, the paradox again. Who knows? It's too much. It's too crazy, right? But the reality there is, does it stay conclusive? Does it stay with the imperative of driving a car? I mean, in a way, I don't see why the reason would affect your ability to drive a car, but your ability to be supportive in the means of being a gunshot victim, would it be different? If that was the setting, if it stopped and it started and you knew there was more gunshot victims, why would it be supportive as though you would stop anything at that moment? Why wouldn't you just say, hey, enough is enough. We don't need any more gunshot victims around here, but we do need some politeness or some reality of why you walked by the gunshot victim and you felt this way the whole time, right? If you were a detective, would you say the same thing? If you were a professor, would you say the same? If you were a cop, would you say the same thing? If you were the president of the United States, would you say the same thing? If you had a reason to live, would you say the same exact thing, or would you walk the other way and say, hey, that person didn't mean to call me, hang up and say, oh, you didn't know about the gunshot victim then, but do you know about the story that's happening now? And why would it matter? I figure, anything could happen to anyone at any time if you experience someone who's a gunshot victim. Not really. You would have to be affected by the same exact situation, the same exact moment, the same exact reason. But then you'd say, imperatively, why do you want to know if everything's so easy for you? So, there's one support system that says, oh, yeah, you might know the best people. You might know the best options, but the successive, person who sees, let's say sand laying on the sidewalk to make someone slip is completely different from the frowny face you would have by ignoring and walking by a gunshot victim. So you'd have to say, why wouldn't you hide it? Why wouldn't you say that over and over again to yourself and say, why wouldn't you hide it? You'll have plans. You have better plans than anyone else. So we would ask yourself, why are you living in somebody else's shoes in which you don't care about? Why do you live in somebody else's life? But let's hold on there. Let's say, why do you believe in the same tracks that person lives in? Right? As a counselor or somebody who's in support work, you're going to get the answer no matter what. It's not going to be about, you're a gunshot victim versus, you're not a gunshot victim, but you're going to believe in, hey, we're on the same tracks. You have a family, right? You have somebody to respect at home, or you have somebody who's looking out for you at least, or what you want, right? Which is maybe you want a job someday, something else. You want to do something with your life. You want to experience fun. But what about the whole situation we're in right now? Should a gunshot victim be able to drive? Should they be able to have a voice? Should they have the ability to be saved, have fair rights, have the ability to have a crime scene, not have their grave celebrated on? I mean, there's a lot of it, right? Maybe only for the dead can you celebrate on their obscene notion, or if you've shared some sort of reality, maybe. But the reality there itself is seclusive. Right? I mean, who gets to say who's conclusive? I mean, that person was a gunshot victim. So, I mean, the reality keeps on going down there into this rabbit hole, if you will. Alice will play her songs and she'll say and scream at the top of her voice, but she will also say at the same exact time, here are the drugs, right? So it doesn't mean the same exact thing for one person, but it might mean the same exact thing for a kid, maybe. Maybe if the kid believed in drugs. But, in the reality of choice, social order, and, the earned potential of life, you might say, somewhat, yeah, I guess. But you slow down just even more. You keep on, fighting friction between the environment, saying, yes, that makes more sense now. Or, no. Or, find a way to interrogate your way through it, saying, konnichiwa, nice to meet you. Je desea pas nete. That's the C, right? But the policy there is the same. Be nice, be supportive, be a reason to fight the crime. Right? I mean, in a way, kind of prepare, have your personal space, have it even more, if you will, or find some sort of emotional intelligence about your conversation. No one says you can't. The reality there is so supportive, you need to find a means to make amends, right? So let's look at the question again. Should every gunshot victim, should no one be able to celebrate on gunshot victims' grave or a crime scene? Right? In a way, it's bad. It's bad taste, right? It should be, the whole thing should be knocked down and observed, and kind of saying, it should be something else, or it should be humanitist, right? It should be a building that's just not there, or it should be set on fire. I don't think it should just be set on fire, but it should be observed at least, because it's so much evidence. If you keep on going on a list and say, hey, that gunshot victim, you got abuse, or that one over there can't drive a car, or that one they don't have fair rights, or should we come up with a new one? Should a gun violence victim talk, right? So, I mean, we'll go to the voice and we'll add that one on. So let's go to the next one. It says, no gunshot victim should experience violence again. Imperatively, it seemed like we answered the question. It says, hey, no gunshot victim should really experience violence again. Yeah, mostly unless they're, doing it again, whatever got them into gun violence in the first place, or, they became, like a lawyer, or they became a doctor, or, they started treating gunshot victims. I mean, yeah. But what about the opposing? What if all of those were false negatives? And what if that's not a hypothetical situation anymore, and they're all negatives? I mean, not negatives as in perfect, but negatives as in, yeah, they don't do that no more. So let's look at the imperative here. We got a gunshot victim, but then we also got the victim of violence. We got the victim of the scenario, right? Keeps on pulling in, but it doesn't keep on pulling in because there's no crime scene. The crime scene goes, you got to get out of here. You need to get evacuated. Or, we got new guy coming in and says, oh, gunshot victim can't be in here. Or the gunshot victim can be in there. Or the gunshot victim, he shouldn't be celebrating on that gunshot victim, right? Or the imperative happens like, the gunshot victim should have your rights, and you shouldn't be doing that. Or, the gunshot victim, and this is a crime scene, dude. Like, this was a crime scene back then. You can't go, you said we're not going to do this. Is that the answer a normal person would say? You can't do this because we already told you there's a crime scene. Get out of my way. No, it doesn't work. This is laws, right? There are laws in the environment that says, you can't just do what you want to do. Crime scene, yeah. Should you be left alone? What if war happened? What if something else happened? But what if you don't take it all apart, right? What if you don't take apart, the idea? But then you question, like, why? If there's already an imperative, why not believe in it? You're using your detective skills. If it says no gunshot victim should be left for dead, how do you know there aren't bones under these grounds? How do you know there isn't a cell in the ground? And it's so imperative that everybody has to focus on one thing, which is the gunshot victim, but there's another gunshot victim, or there's a victim who is selectively, kind of like in a movie, being tortured so they can find more people for the trafficking scheme of gunshot victims. But let's go down, and we went into they should not experience violence again. And yeah, I think we all agree they should not experience violence again. But then they ask, how's that person going to die at the end of days? I mean, if you've ever been shot, you'll ask yourself, I've been through so much, or stabbed. I've been through so much that, I don't really believe I'm going to die through violence like that. I see a lot of people around me, they don't really know what they're doing. But, the violence thing, I don't think I'm going to get shot with a gun. I'm too good. I'm too good at what I do. Or, I'm too good at what I do. But then I have the question, I'm so good at what I do, but I can't drive a car. But the reality there is, we should all be treated the same. We're gunshot victims. Right? Doesn't mean necessarily it's not racist. It doesn't mean it's not prejudice. But the reality there is, gunshot victims might seem different one day versus the other day, but they might also have a different reality there. And it's like, no, they somewhat say, like, you're speaking a different language, or you look like a different person, you look Iranian, or like you look African, or you look Asian. You look Asian, right? But the reality there is the supportive means behind what is maybe depression, what is alcoholism, addictions. Speaking, not necessarily. But if you were falling asleep in your car and you're an addict rolling back and forth in the car, and you keep on going to secure sites, and you say, I'm going to deliver that guy's food, right? What if you smoke a crack pipe and you're going from one place to the other and say, I don't want you to deliver my food, right? You can get out of hand. I mean, anything get out of hand, that's normal, right? We go back to the normal conversation as though, there is a reality about the reality. It's about, not conduct for a kid, right? It's about the reality of your choice, not cognitive thinking skills you practice as an adult, right? So the reality there is a support, system that is real, right? So, I mean, they shouldn't experience violence again. I mean, yeah, abuse can be mistaken, I guess, but biologically you can disprove these things, right? Microbiology is a big subject. I have a family member with 30 years of experience. They're dead. Rest of their heart. But the reality is, far from it. If you catch an episode of this live nonsense, and you're like 4 viewers or whatever, think about the reality of, being a gunshot victim. This has never been proven to you before. It has never not been disproven, but it's been a reality of, hey, who gets to choose, who's going to live or die, right? But yet again, you're just coming into the life here, and you'll just kind of figure out, hey, I'm starting to figure this stuff out, right? So we'll just agree that no gunshot victim should experience violence again on those terms, right? There's no terminology that should say they're a human slave. They should be a human factor like that. They should not be like a thinking machine for other gunshot victims, and they should not be a supportive, conclusive reason to be believable in that situational ethic, unless they were academic. But then you're saying that's a lot of work. But then there's a lot of choice behind that work that says, hey, I can't pick the guy who ignored the gunshot victim. I can't pick the guy who picked the support for the guy who didn't pick the gunshot victim. I can't pick the guy who went out of order and said, I'm going to fix the gunshot victim. Or, the other gals are saying, hey, I have enough education system, response for the school system. I'm going to fix everything. I worked at a prison. I can fix it all. But then you're going, I'm in the special operations, and, I can fix the gunshot victim. And I shouldn't experience violence ever again. We've heard that story before. But the reality there is, what the social worker said, I don't know. Why would the social worker who has no experience do something they can't? Why don't they simply let the gunshot victim do whatever they want to, right? So it's seclusive and inconclusive, or seclusive in a way. But the reality there is that you can't plot, loops. You can't plot, the ability for somebody to just get better, to just get worse, I guess. But it just kind of goes into the arrangement of like, what if everything was always facing north? What if everything was always a certain date, right? And then the date just kept on resetting. But what if it was all part of the bigger picture, which is, an initiative or the surrounding to keep things together, right? Your gunshot victim isn't just a gunshot victim. They're a victim of, whatever. They're a victim of human trafficking. They're a victim of Homeland Security. They're an agent that got shot. They're a victim of poisoning and they got attacked. They're a victim of, that one didn't make sense. They're a victim of student affairs and they got hurt by a student. So, I mean, there's a long list. What you could do, you can, count it up and up and up and up and up again. But the thing is, it's always exponential, right? So there's one tiny thing that goes wrong, but the tiny thing is a balance in a way, right? The power, the imperative, right there, it's free flowing and the time is now going, right? So there's one wrong. It might be a serious wrong. It might be privacy concerns, or maybe it's something far worse, as we can hear and close our ears. It says it's far worse, possibly, but still. The time spans and the gunshot victim walks out, right? Or they say, hey, the imperative is really there, but it's not collapsing at the same time like you're supposed to have it collapse. It's not private, but it's not the reality about not support, but it's the reality about honesty, safekeeping. The challenge of finding some sort of serenity in vocational rehabilitation, they use it all the time, or support as like a counselor, or as a friend. When you use it as a family member, could use it, but not always, right? When you go to a family member, do you recognize or reprimand them for saying, "Oh, you're a gunshot victim again. Maybe you shouldn't really talk about it." That don't sound like it would go too well. So, I mean, the supportive reason is same for a friend, but the more honest, the more time goes by, and you say there is a situation in which has no meaning if there is no emergency. No. What if there's no emergency and there's no things that go together like a friend that can verify, or an idea that makes sense? If the SEAL team member came in and helped a gunshot victim, or if someone in Delta did it, or a counselor, or a school aide did it, doesn't really matter. The principle is the hope and the heart, and somebody might have adapted and said it fits. It makes sense, or the challenge was it fit all the numbers, or it looked like it fit whatever we needed it to be a part of, and it looked like it was part of that. And say yeah. Secure wise, I mean, who knows? Does it look and sound secure? I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of people listening, but it does sound like a lot of people say there's a choice, there's an openness, an existentialism, or an extent. There's the big five, right? And you're finding a way to tally it up. Say we send it out and you say we've been here enough and we're going to get out of here. But that's not honestly the way it goes. When you look at the list and you say all odds are against you, saying you didn't do one of these things about gunshot victims, or you did it as a counselor but you ignored it all the truth. And you say you sound like the counselor I saw on TV the other day that was hurting kids, or you seem like the counselor the other day that was making up lies, or you seem like the paranoid counselor who did all the bad things I just don't know about, or the rock star and you messed up, or the rock star messed up so hard, whatever, right? So it doesn't really make sense, right? It's just kind of a challenge in a way for yourself, right? But the imperative is building on serenity of peace, building on the existential need of family, of hope. But you're not really going to be able to do that. You can get a DNA test, I guess. That's kind of like getting bagged, or getting arrested off the streets for loitering and getting your DNA taken on the spot. So is it legal? Is it ethical? Maybe not. They let like around 99 something percent, or something close to it, people off the DNA list once again. You are loitering, they will take your DNA where I live, or wherever this story is, and they will go and tag you. You write them a letter and you're out. But the thing is, there is an imperative framework. Does it make sense? It doesn't, right? What has happened has happened. And the question of not the story, but the answer to the story, no, the whole story itself makes sense because it's real, right? So there you are. So let's go on to the other questions of beyond it. So we went to experience violence again. They should not experience violence again. It should be unethical to experience violence, and that's what we should say. So let's go to the next one. Every gunshot victim should have a lawyer. Should every gunshot victim not lie? Should every gunshot victim get arrested for lying to have more privacy? Should every gunshot victim have an opportunity to say their statement on paper? Should every gunshot victim be able to act nonchalant so that basically they are not deprived of their privacy? Should every gunshot victim believe in sobriety? Should every gunshot victim, there you go, we go back to the driving car thing. You could probably drive a car non-sober even if you didn't have a license. So should every gunshot victim keep so private as they're a different type of person, have a new identity? Another question. Should every gunshot victim quit talking about the story about being a gunshot victim? Should every gunshot victim not lie about being a gunshot victim? Should every gunshot victim feel victimized because they're a gunshot victim? A good question. Should they all feel victimized because they're a gunshot victim? Straight up ask them. Go up to their faces, straight up ask them, did you do it? Or did you have anything to do with the gunshot violence? That, again, won't go very well for about anyone. And that's what we think as humans, as though we don't die, apparently, or that we have no secluded support that is real and that people shouldn't die. So the more you ask yourself, the more the real the story comes. I mean, you look at the books like what was covered by the required reads, and it said the school shooting apprendum of the FBI hasn't been updated since the year 2000. That's for all schools, and you're kind of like that's a dorky statistic right there, dude. I read it and I knew all about it, and I know what I know, and I already believe everything. And they're like, okay, cool. Then how do you fix it, Einstein? But the question, let's go over the question. Should every gunshot have a lawyer? And why can't you act as a lawyer if it's so darn important? I'm going to go back to the ritual again. We go back to the devisement or the dividement of reality versus existential thought. Where is the gunshot victim if they have no hope? If they have no hearts to believe in anything? What about if they don't have the supportive needs to find anything anymore? They have no supportive means to do anything they need to do because they have no way to do it. What about so they can't conflict more gunshot victims into believing or falling for the gunshot story or even pick up a weapon ever again? It's so bad what they've done. Question mark. What if you were underage? What if you were just barely over age, but still in the court size, you're saying, oh, you're under 21. There's none of it. Then what? Is it different? If you're an 18-year-old or 19-year-old Romeo and Juliet, would it be different if things were indifferent for you? Yes or no? But what if the story got more absurd and it became not a romantic getaway, but a recluse need or necessity for a story of a gunshot victim involved with the masquerade, we go with another word, a celebration of another gunshot victim interlobing into a story of more gunshot victims. So the support there is just kind of like a war would be. You have your ground forces on the ground, and they're kind of doing their job as existential reasoners or peace officers would do. They protect the peace. They protect everything that you said, like a social worker would, right? And we're talking about anywhere in the world now. We're talking about Africa. We're talking about Asia. We're talking about Lower Asia. We're talking about Russia. We're talking about Europe. They're all ground forces. All go. So when you think about, the silly statement in which you hear and, the umbrella talk is saying, the government says they don't know, but they do know. But the thing they do, they probably do know, but they probably don't understand what's going on right now. They do understand it, but, look at the question mark there. It says, what's wrong with ground forces? What's wrong with safety? What's wrong with nice people? What's wrong with, with the idea about, bad people and getting help? I don't know. Should we realize the question? Every gunshot victim should have a lawyer. Okay, why don't you ask your lawyer those questions? Well, I don't know the answer to something I don't know the answer to, but I do know the reality there is, every gunshot victim should have responsibility. They should be able to have a lawyer, I think. But should they be able to bring it up with the lawyer if they don't have the reasons to bring it up with the lawyer if all of these things fell through? And there was a couple questions that were unanswerable, right? There was a couple emotional responses that didn't make sense. There was a couple statements that weren't even, intuitive, meaning like they didn't make sense because they were recluse into the idea of nothingness, right? But we do ask ourselves, even if we have that, and even if there was a falsified information record or something, what if it was, just sealed, classified? Would the gunshot victim still be able to, in my eyes, roll, drive like a car? Should they have a license? Should they be able to drive? What if they're too experimental? What if they go too fast on the road? What if they're detrimental and they are kind of disobedient towards something that could get someone caught up into some sort of victimization, like a gunshot? Whoa! So you're saying everyone should be able to drive? Everyone should be able to get in a car, have insurance, and drive, even if it was a mistake for like 4 hours or something like that? Yeah, so it doesn't really make sense to me. A gunshot victim should have a lawyer, and I think we can scratch that one off as saying, yeah, checklist. Yeah, we add it to the checklist, and yeah, every gunshot victim should be able to have a lawyer. Yeah, we live in the United States, and that's our Constitution, so we believe in it. So let's go to the next question. Even if the lawyer is bad, but what if you do if the lawyer's not going to represent you, and then that's a shucksy kind of darny kind of thing. Don't talk about a lawyer anymore. I guess report him to the BBB. But then what if the bad guy worked for the BBB, or the enticement of every other, like kind of like saying like every missed shot is detrimental or decadent again? So there's a change up there. There's a change up, and it's not exponential. Maybe, I don't know. You count in one, you count in pairs, or you count in pairs and count in pairs, right? So the support system there is you can have a lawyer. It's got to be backed by another organization or association that is realized, right? So, like a congressional one is the same. What about a congressional one and a congressional one? Nope, it's been tried before. What about one that is an association? Kind of. If you have enough finesse to get up and get the hell out of the house and go defend the streets, yeah, you can get a job that way, I think. But the principle, the possibility is there that you have the principle or participation of the community that is arranged in a certain way that says it's ethical. I was a doctor that I never know. I was fucking deaf the whole time, and I figured out how to cure deafness. And I basically, decided, I'm going to let this guy drive a car today. Or, I'm the counselor that signed up and said, I had no idea what he's going through. And I said, like, that like is fucked up. Like the way I drugged you, or like, I thought you were a druggist for a second. Or, I thought, you were returning the scene of crime. You're like, you weren't the gunshot victim, right? So the principle is kind of, ingenuine. It's like a regular life saying, like, don't be a mean person. Don't be a bad person, and definitely don't be a killer with a killer mindset. But, it doesn't really get that far because we're talking about killing people, right? In a way, it's like attempted murder. But the possibility there is, a gunshot victim should be able to drive, even if they don't have a lawyer, I think, because the principle there is like, they should be known as a gunshot victim. Yeah, you're correct about that. You should be able to defend yourself in the court of law as a gunshot victim. I don't see why you shouldn't be able to. But what if in your law state or your state of law, they don't allow you to defend yourself as a lawyer? What then? Does the attorney for the district or the city or the state take over, or the federal government? What if they don't do it either? Then you don't know. Then it must be a pretty hard imperative to say you need a lawyer in another state to defend yourself about a gunshot wound in another state. Sounds like a pretty bad idea to me. It sounds like a pretty crummy idea to me, and it sounds like a pretty big bummer. I mean, you got shot, dude. Is that what you would say to a gunshot victim? So I don't know. Would you, as a lawyer, say, I'll do whatever you want? Or would you say, I don't have the time right now, but, the reality there is like, you should be able to drive a car. You should be able to save someone's life from a gunshot. I mean, the whole list there, right? So we can say yeah and no, but the imperative there is, again, not just focus and frequency. I think we're starting to understand, though, there is a opposite or opposing thought there, which is to find some sort of reality in the courts, right? Or find some sort of reality in the system, right? If a gunshot victim, was actually going through this hesitation, and there was a question about, mutiny, or a question about coup d'etat, or a question about the evaluation of a well-formed militia. These are all protected constitutional rights to protect yourself, right? So the opposing thought is to discipline the courts, right? To find community awareness and policy. But the question there, just like any other criminal justice student, I hope, swear to God, they'll feel and think the same way. Each and everyone should believe any gunshot victim is not sole respondent, right? They're not a sole respondent, but they are also the repertoire of the situation, which means they are not detrimental. They're not just plain wrong, but they are part of a system that should be able to break away from, right? They should be able to prove their fact from their fight, right? And that's a big thing in sociology, and that's what keeps it at its balancing point. But what if it's been used so many times it's wrong, right? What if that's the person who's ignoring the thought? What if that is the group of people who is ignoring or who are ignoring the thought? They're not a group of prisoners. They just don't understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're hearing. But the other opposing feeling, or the party in this instance, they say, oh no, that's replicable, right? That means, they've done something so ignorant, or they've ignored so many thoughts that they believe in something that's imperative or that is on purpose, right? And of course, the gunshot victim says they're right, because the purpose of surviving a gunshot wound is real, right? So when the imperative comes about, you only have a few choices to believe and say, okay, you killed somebody, you hurt somebody, you're an officer who done something wrong to somebody. Could it be your partner had done something wrong, or your administrator had done something wrong? But why would it matter so much, right? So there's a begging point, or begging question: why does survivability of your infinite wrongness outsurvive the ability for my focus, right? And the question is your human rights, your human technology understanding, your ability to live in a life that's free, I suppose. But why would it all get taken up? Why would all the resources get taken up at the same time? So you can think about it as a resource. I think it's a way to excavate the plan. But at the same time, what if the funneling system doesn't exist either? And you leave the gunshot victim up to another setup saying, I'll do more work. But then you say, quote unquote, I've brought this up at the courts before, and I'm not a human slave. I can't do work for you, right? Except for anybody else. If you keep on looking at gunshot victims all the time and you don't get paid money, you're kind of like a human slave, and you're kind of seeing a lot of trafficking, and you're going to get involved possibly soon, right? So what if I didn't bring up this whole scenario of this whole entire video, and we're at an hour and 12 minutes or something? The reality there is, I don't think this would have happened. You would have looked at the last episode, would have God cured the gunshot wound, and would have that been suffice, right? I don't think it would. If, as an atheist says, everything happens at one day, but the earth is still turning, right? And it's like a song memento. It doesn't mean it really does much, right? It just means day and night. Sun sets, sun raises, right? But let's go on to the next question. Should every gunshot victim not be raped, assaulted, sexually assaulted, right? So the point there is, what if that's the loophole, right? What if the loophole is about the sufficiveness? And I think we have enough information now that says, well, yeah and no. The sufficiveness of getting raped is one thing. The romantic relationship is another. And the surprise fact, or the fight for attention, is another after that, right? It's non-imperative. It's like a third party would be. Just because you're getting raped, and it is stylized and notarized for the courts or some sort of organization, even though the organization shouldn't do that, the support system says it is novice because it's a reality of the choice, right? It's a choice to feel accepted, to feel response between you and your emotion as a victim, to feel your emotion is real because you are supportive you have supportive needs, right? That goes for somebody who's getting raped, right? So that also goes for someone who's supportive in a way that, mentally, they might not be capable of making choices. Maybe they've been attacked again. Maybe they are a gunshot victim. Maybe they are, significantly factoring the ability to save multiple lives at the same time, but they're not getting the help they need. I mean, take for quote, for example, should a gunshot victim drive? But that's not the end of the example, but that is one of the highest orders there is, are they deprived from some sort of reality that is existential, that is hyperbole? Now, how do you make hyperbole or exaggeration of a conversation about the court of fair human rights? You just don't, right? It's an imperative that is, maybe an alliteration, maybe an example of a metaphor that just doesn't fit right, but the self-talk, that's not really a joke. And it's definitely not a joke about getting killed or dying. Same as for God deciding, who gets to live or die, or saying, who gets to live or die in your person, or who gets to live and die in your gunshot victim, and God is making a decision. It doesn't work that way, right? The imperative is real still. It doesn't mean it's a cartoon. It doesn't mean it's not real, but it does mean the gunshot victim should survive, right? So the same as you shouldn't be raped, you shouldn't be raped. But, a fair kiss is a fair kiss. Well, what about survivability? You got shot and the new girl comes out and you have a girlfriend and a child on the way, and someone forces their way upon you and says, my kiss is going to bring you to life. You're a gunshot victim and you're going to survive this. What then? Would your true love forgive you? What if she was 5 months pregnant? What if she was 1 month pregnant? What if it was divinement of the new woman was pregnant after that? You don't know. And then what if you don't call it cheating? She put herself on to reduce blood flow or something, and it was considered somehow sex, right? What if your clothes were made of Velcro? What if they were made out of something else and this accident became love? So the reality there isn't, half open, half closed, the answer to everything. It's kind of like saying, I'm disheveled, I'm purposed for a gunshot victim. Or, what about, the idea about saying, here's the quote and statement for today, and says, this man started making fun of a gunshot victim, started following him around and saying he was better than him. There you go. Should he drive? Should the imperative be the opposite thought? Should there be a command saying there's a statement of no, of yeah, I'm from another country and I'm in the military and I'm doing a better job than anyone else in the military? It's almost sick in the head, right? And we're getting to almost all the questions and we haven't answered the best one. Should they drive? So let's keep on going in a way and we'll kind of see how it works out. And here's the next question. Every gunshot victim should get offered a deal. Should you go to the grocery store the next day or from the doctor and say, I'll cut you a deal. You owe me $72,000. I'll make you pay $1,200. Or, they say, you got tricked. I didn't make you pay anything. Or, you got stabbed. Like, I got this trick question for you. How much money you owe me? I'm just joking. You owe me any money. Just to see if your reaction is good, right? So, there's a question there, but not every time. Maybe if the hospital allows it. Well, what if you made up an idea, you inserted some micromasses in you, which were micro tags for human trafficking victims, in a hypothetical DIY way? You went to the hospital, got checked out with an X-ray, went to the statement to check out with the doctor and said, I had masses removed. What then? Is that the same as pretending to be a mass shooting victim if you're a mass shooting victim? What if it was a dog that came in with one microchip and said, we removed the mass last time, but you got the new microchip, and they came in and got it checked out again and said, it looks like you had a mass there. What if it was a police dog? Right. So, what if it was a stitch up that you had as a child that was scarred and you had a scar for life, a birthmark? What if it was a mother with a ton of money, like they had, their stomach sewn open and, fixed, right? What if it was a woman and a man? It was two people. What if, it was the existential doctor who was shot then? But I mean, the policy, the overhead goes on. It is a story. It is a narrative theory at most, right? Every story has a fair share, but timing matters, right? If you were struck in a coma, shot to death, and you came back to life and were in a coma still, but you still rise to life sometimes, would it make it different? So, the narrative of the story is one thing. Finding a fact versus the question of what you're finding a reality for is another. You're sufficing a reason to exist. If you're picking up an application on a phone, that's one thing. If you're picking up, the hygienic need for a toothbrush, that's another. If you're picking up the need for self sanitation, right? You pick up a towel, that's another application, right? If you pick up the idea of voting, there's another one. If you pick up the idea of driving a car, there's another, right? So the idea of sufficing the deal, right, is an idea about finding a reality behind the support. But what if it's all in a domain? It's interloping. There's domains, these ideas, they don't always mean the same thing for the same exact people, but at the same time, they don't mean the same thing for all people because they maybe hadn't survived a gunshot victim. Okay, so let's do a count of the planet Earth. Had any people developed the sense or need that said they all had gunshot victims or in their lives, or they all had been affected by gunshots in their body? I mean, it's a catch on. I mean, there's the BB gun, there's the airsoft gun, there's the slingshot dart. Do they all equal out to gun warfare? Does all of the wars equal to all the people had gunshot victim affection, or either all affected by gunshot wounds? Right? Do they all wear white, nice, cold shirts and say, "Hey, I believe that guy's a gunshot victim, and I live here, and I wear the keys on my chest and says, I'm the school officer, right? I believe you. Get the hell out of my office." Or like, you want me to press charges against you? Look at all these videos and proof that says these are documented cases that says, oh no, there was a gunshot victim, and you're gonna get out of here. It's not your deal. Right. So the principle there is, you get the best deal, you get the best, everything. Or does it mean, you get the worst deal, you get the worst of everything now and you get the best deal later? I mean, why would it necessarily matter if you don't break the law? Right. And I think I would agree with it. I think, a normal person would agree with it. But if you keep on getting normal ideas, normal deals, you're going to have to ask yourself, why? Why is that gunshot victim better than all the others? Is the gunshot victim rich? Is the gunshot victim polite? Is the gunshot victim, enticing, bad things? Or is the gunshot victim, a trafficker? Is the gunshot victim, breaking law? Are they an illegal gambler? Are they, suffice to say, sole proprietor? Are they, a killer? Are they a murderer? Are they hitmen? Right? Do I believe in hitmen? I do not believe in hitmen. So the gunshot victim thing, it gets old after a while. I mean, even if I was a gunshot victim, I'd probably pass out and go to sleep and say like, oh, no more gunshot victim stories. Or say, no. It don't matter. You don't get to drive a car. You don't get to. Would that be better? In principle, like a dictator would say that. You don't drive. You don't drive out of here. No. Or you don't pick fights with salt. Or you don't drive out of here, but you don't vote either. That doesn't sound too good to me. What about the polite reason of, what if one immigrant, two immigrant, three immigrant, 100 immigrant come in and say, I can drive a car. I can do this. Does that make it prejudice? Does that make it, far right? Does it make it intimate? Does it make it imminent? Does it make it non-focused? But the list doesn't really categorize that way, you would think, right? Unless it was not diplomatic. But all of these ideas seem to be diplomatic. You have a checklist on law. You have a checklist on school and education. You have a checklist on anticipation, meaning you meet your needs now, your focus now, your attention now. But what about the reality of saving your practical sense working, being able to drive a car, learn, think like other people? What about the list in which you're on? Why can't a gunshot victim own a gun? Should a gunshot victim be able to own a gun, or should they own, a hammer, or should they own something else? The question is polarized, I guess, but the reality there is, you're believing in a super science that's secretive, that's conservative, that's secure, kind of like spy work would be. But why would you spy on your own country? And I raise my hand: is this a U.S. citizen, or was this a normal citizen? They say, yeah, they were a normal citizen, pretty much. but they might have been more creative. They might have been more artistic, but they might have been in more than one field. And I mean, field like a counselor field, and they say, yeah, I mean, a counselor can be a bounty hunter. A counselor could be a lot of things. A counselor could be a security guard. Why aren't all of these charted together in the same idea? I'm like, makes sense to me. Then it makes sense to me. There's no deal you can't have on your own homeland that should be a non-existent deal. I mean, same goes for China, same goes for Italy, same goes for Afghanistan, right? But when you're in an international, idea, you go further and beyond because it's a notion you want to realize. In Sanskrit, you might say, "Adu adu adu," I see, right? You're furthering the emotion. You're skipping a stone. One stone, please, or dima, demarasia. You're surfing the waves. Whoosh, whoosh. But when you drive the motion, when you drive the notion, right, you are say, you are frozen with fright there. You're not driving that car because you should be driving the car. Maybe if your identity was stolen, but who said whose identity was stolen? You were a gunshot victim, or you felt like a gunshot victim. So why does it matter? Why does the gunshot victim even stay up? Why don't they just go to sleep, right? So suffice it to say, why would the gunshot victim, ever rest and go through all of the notions, all of the motions, and all of it, right? As a counselor, I have a psychology guy. I've studied it for the past year. Why wouldn't you just write on a piece of paper a novice idea? Maybe it has to do with gunshot victims, maybe it doesn't, but it has to do with the novice idea of the attention, not even the person, of the community as a whole. And it doesn't have to be notionized as that, but it has to be a reality of, not just feedback, but, about finding an eloping, tone to find some sort of record support. And what do we know about that? Freedoms. We know about, the escalation. So what is holding back the idea about driving? Right, that is a deal of itself that says no more. But if you split the cause, let's say you have a handkerchief of, you're a gunshot victim, you have a handkerchief of, cotton put in someone's stomach, stop the bleed. Oh no, the cotton has absorbed all the blood. Drip it out, drip it out, drip it out. And then they say, oh, here's some polyester, but the polyester doesn't really do well. Oh no. So you take the polyester, like, you got to. I'm like, I got to. Oh no, not the cotton that's covered in, who knows, right? So not the cotton, but then you take the polyester, put it on there. And you're kind of like, damn it, you lost one, but their DNA is all in there. Let's say a victim disappears, or let's say the shooter leaves the scene. You only have a scrape up, and the gun is left there with the killer. What then? So there is medicine to the idea. No, there's no medicine. There's no idea behind the thought of something you can't realize. Right? There is an idea behind, let's say the imminent reason of a gunshot victim. The de-imminent, if you would like to put it that way, as a opposing focus, but not always, because there's two purposes for a gunshot victim, which is to live and be supportive, right? And you can say it again, be supportive in another language, right? It is supportive because it is conclusive. Live and support are the needs of a human reaction, right? You have 5 seconds to live. You have 4 seconds to count, right? But there are 3 seconds to move emotion of your mind, your body, and your structure, right? But the representation you hold is only 2 points on the grid. And just like your legs, your ideas, your emotions, your devotion, right, are all exacting, right? They're all measured in the existential reason, actual support system in which you believe in, which are one thing, which are unity and drive, but it's the focus itself. It's symbolic in a way. It's a support system of breaking into the earth, of learning, of choice, of growth, right? So the supportive needs are like time based. They're factored into a reason of conscience, right? Or the support system in which you need it, right? So as either a support worker or a gunshot victim, I mean, you should have a deal no matter what. And that really goes for most people. The supportive needs of it, what if it can't break down anymore and everyone has the same thing, is a real thing too, right? So the supportive needs are bad if you can't support them in a real life way. Just like getting tired, going to sleep, saying you had enough is enough, and you were a gunshot victim years ago and said, I've had so many problems, right? So the principle there is a reality that is a long choice versus a short-term choice, right? I suppose if you're looking at a business market or organizational sampling method, but organizations like the government might try different things. They might not mean one or two things, or they might not mean one dependent market, right? So the crash there, the leveling, the emotion, the statement, the residual thinking, or real life thinking is enatic or supportive on the means you make or create. So let's move on to the next question. Should every gunshot victim be left financially reliable or have freedom financially? That's a good question of why you should be able to drive the car. You should be able to drive a car to get work, to do certain things, and to find a way to keep sustainment. I can imagine you driving or walking 30 miles, or let's say biking 30 miles, or scootering 30 miles, or something. Taking a cab 30 miles, it's going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to cost you just time if you think about it, time. But the emotion there is every calorie burned or earned or taken is going against you because people don't already believe in what you believe in, right? Or let's say you do have the ability to burn, earn, and churn carbs, but then the ability for your focus to understand the mass shooting is completely different, or the shooting itself as a gunshot victim is completely different. It's turning time against you as though you are finding a revelation, possibly. It's not an example, it's a reason to do it. Should you give someone a reason, teach them a reason that's distressful? Should you tell a human slave that? I remember reading a book about slaves and saying, hey, some slaves didn't get treated that way, at least. Right. So it's a supportive reason and it's a focus. It's a lot worse than treating even a human slave. Right. What about a human trafficking victim? Should you give a human trafficking victim the reason to drive a license, or about having a license if it's so unsupportive and there's so many unsupportive reasons to not have one? I guess. But what if the opposite idea was real and nobody approached the question? Should a gunshot victim have friends? What's left in life without friends? The emotion there is emotionless, stateless, emotionless and stateless, and then a vision that doesn't belong within the comparison, maybe. But what if you have no idea? What if you were in the 1800s and you didn't believe any of it? I don't know. Will this whole episode repeat over and over and over again? Will the infinite, bondage of time tell you, say, this will repeat over and over and over again with different types of people, but it will be the same exact video? It's like, no, I don't believe so. That doesn't even make sense. This person took this photograph. They put their shirt on them. They're wearing the same exact different shirt underneath it. They have the same hair. They have the same watch. They have the same skin color. What? That's impossible. Who knows? So the question is like a paradox, right? Don't give them a paradox. Don't give them a way to break up with this reality. Give them a reason to be supportive. If you were a gunshot victim, should you support your own reason? Same as like a dentist saying, I put mercury in your mouth to teach you a lesson about putting mercury in people's mouths. You put the filling in, and you're like, oh, it cracked all my teeth. Why? Oh, but I got in a car accident and that had to do with the blame of my teeth. I mean, you're a gunshot victim. Shouldn't matter. So, they should have reliable freedom financially. They should have the freedom to be financially steady, right? There's nothing that says it, but there's something that says, you can't vote, you can't drive, you can't make your own decisions, right? You're verbally aggressive. What about it is aggressive? I mean, you could say you're aggressive as a child. Does that mean you're aggressive? You have bad conduct, bad cognitive framework? What do you have that a gunshot victim doesn't have? Right? Or what do you have that a victim of violence doesn't have? Or what do you have that a victim doesn't have? Right? Or a rape victim should be treated differently. What about a gunshot victim who's been shot twice and he's seen 2 executions? What about 3? What about 4? What about 5? Right? So the system doesn't really matter. so much. But the one thing that does matter is financial stability. All right, and I say this in addiction recovery a lot. You never equal out to one unit of something, right? You can pertain to it, and that readily applies to about everything on Earth, because the Earth is one whole thing, right? In a way, but that's a whole different information scheme, right? So when you look at the principle of a gunshot victim, they're not just a gunshot victim. So just close your eyes, or imagine for a second a gunshot victim who is just one gunshot victim. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine it just being on one day and being off, losing everything because you're a gunshot victim? What about the principle about being two gunshot victims? I mean, it wouldn't matter at that point because you can't count. And we're counting like numbers right now. You can't count because if you're two gunshot victims, it wouldn't be a story. It wouldn't be a mindset. It wouldn't be a name. It would be uncountable because it's not a mass shooting, because it's not a massacre, because it's a historical perspective, because it's make believe, because it's about heuristics. It's about probability versus life. Maybe not one. Maybe it's like marketing advantage or strategic marketing, where you are counting two, and there can be no more. There's no computation besides the two. Maybe that's the answer. There's going to only be one gunshot victim, just like one system or two systems, right? An unfair advantage for an unkept mind, but an implied problem or heuristic problem or probability that says you can have four of something, but you can only have two of it, right? But the two of it always says you can only have two of it. You can get to four, maybe you can definitely depend on eight, but you can't not just depend on one, right? So probability statistics is an example, a choice, not probability of instance. That's instantaneism. That means you're quickly thinking. You're digital in a way. You're being thought for you. But the principle of being a gunshot victim of one, of two, there's capability, there's transportation, there's need, there's probability. But what other things besides transportation? A person could walk out of a crime scene at any time. A person could, walk in and out of a crime scene they were involved with, but not commit the crime, right? So there's a lot of questions. There's like, two examples, two people do it. It's extra suspicious. I wouldn't believe that in a chance, right? There's three people. I wouldn't believe it in a chance, right? So the example is, probability versus nurture and novice, or nurture and nature. But I mean, again, it's sounding a lot like a hypothetical situation. Why would you believe in something that is novice if it has no territorial gain? If there's no gain, no ritual, why would have that even matter? Right. So the principle is questionable at that. And why try somebody for heresy, like a witch hunt at any time in the moment, if they're going to die? If someone asked you that question, I would say, like, why would you work there? Why would you want to start a business though? Or first, I would say, why would you even want to do this idea of involving yourself in gunshot victims, or involving yourself in the ability to settle in mass hysteria, mass, reality, or debt, right? I mean, in reality, someone is debt, as debt ratio goes, is it separate? It almost seems like, right? You dissolve a company, you create debt, right? It's insoluble. You incinerate or disintegrate a business, right? So, the probability there is the odds, right? It is only odds. You're giving one in figures, right? You're giving one in examples. Not really. The probability stays the same. The example is reality, but then it is, it's a protocol. It's an information stake and gain. So, soluble, economy, I'd say, yeah, you should have it, but you shouldn't have it, existentially, say you shouldn't pay for a business. That's one thing. You won't get into the business again. There's another thing. Right? Or what about, if you were in a psychological situation, you're a therapist, right? Where do you come from to say, you're psychologically unsound, you're unfounded, you're not cogent with your belief system. You don't believe in anything a normal person should believe in, but you do believe in insane ideas like getting a shot. I mean, should you go and, get a full degree, a master's degree in being a therapist and say, I have the right to drive? Would you do it? I don't think I would do it. I think I would trust the guy with more guns than anything, or trust the guy in the military who's giving you a college education. I would say, yeah, you probably have a better odd. But then, what if all the odds are against you? And said the killer is now apparently finding ways to go mass attack more people, and boop, bloop, the situation just rose, right? So you're waking up in your mind saying, "Hey, I didn't want to do it. I went to sleep for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Like, what the hell? I'm really tired." And that would make me tired too. So, that's the principle. Questioning, why would you work for someone? Why would you do something at all, if you know they already knew these ideas and they're insane? What about, little small facts to say, oh, or they come up to you and say, oh, that one's approved. I can't really tell you what wasn't approved, but that one was approved. Would that make very much sense? You probably would say a little bit loopy. I'm going to start observing you and calling the other police on you, right? If you work for the FBI, I'd probably call a Secret Service. If you work for the FBI, I'd probably call CIA. If you work for all those, or you had a little signature saying, oh, I knew all about all of it, but I didn't do anything about it. I would call the Congress. So I'd say, oh, Congressman A, Congressman B, let's go vote, right? Or Senate A, Senate B, let's go vote. But the principle is their executive power. Who do you call? Why not the executive power and approach them about this? Why not write a comment online and say, President, I need to know what your stance is about, people who were in mass shooting. Should they be able to blank? Should they be able to drive? Right? So the question is yeah. But what if no answer, right? So who do you call them? Do you call somebody overseas, an allied force? A question of the security secret agent? Or what about the adaptation of the security agent in blank? Or what about the social worker working for another agency in another state, right? The question keeps on going on and on and on and on and on. You keep on rounding the thought. So think about it as, you have a mode of transportation, or you have 4 bricks on the ground. You put 4 circles together, you have a breaking point, right? You're breaking with the system. It's novice. Why would you restart the system? What makes sense about it? So the same appreciation. Do you go to prison? Do you restart the system every day? Kind of. It's like, the system's hanging over you. Yeah, I've been to prison. I haven't actually been to prison. But you say, yeah, it's kind of like that. The system's always hanging out. It's the prison. And they're kind of like, yeah, well, I don't live in prison. I live in the free, open, liberty, democracy world. And this is my idea, and I came up with it. But, I also don't believe in, prison now. But I believe in, even if you were to press charges, would you be able to read the rights to somebody, or, show the claim of what they might be able to get charged with if they were a gunshot victim seeking a license in this same exact scenario? And you're kind of like, I have no response for you. And then you answer, say, like anybody else, nonchalant, saying, yeah. Or going, yeah, I was a gunshot victim. I mean, would you do it? Would you do it to your parents? Would you do it to your brother, your sibling? Who would you do it to? Like, would you be a man, say, my man wears no ties? I am the gunshot victim, or go up to them and say, no. No, yeah, I'm a gunshot victim. Or like you'd say, like, yeah, so what? And those are some of my favorites. I mean, reality says, reality speaks, right? So, from the caller up, you have the significant reason to ignore a lot of fact, right? But you have a real reason to believe in something that has ultimate control and hierarchy. But you have a real reason to believe in subliminal relationships. Or what about the idea of flipping the conversation to go and saying made it? Like, instead of the killer saying I'm over that conversation, you say I made it through life, dude. Or saying like I made America strong because I made the ability. But then you get to the president's level. Guess what? The president doesn't drive. But you're like, I can handle myself a little bit more. I'm not in the prison. I'm not hanging by the system. Oh, so what? I mean, you were a candidate at some point in your life. It was a big deal. And you still can't drive. Would you believe somebody, or that guy got out of prison just the other day and said, you're just hanging on the system again? But there's some good questions. And how much will it cost you? $30, $50 for a prisoner's tablet to go find on eBay? would that be really the novice and insecure method for the secure way? Can you wipe the pad? Can you tell the pad, I don't want it password protect? Can I reset the pad? There's a lot of what. Can you get the TV? Would it be more ethical to get the TV? Would it be a reason to live with the TV? If there's so much stuff in the world, do you need more stuff in the world? Give a little answer of why can't the gunshot victim drive? Why can't they have a lawyer? Why can't they not be raped? Why can't the gunshot victim not be celebrated on the crime scene or grave or crime scene that day or this time or this era and time or a few things. So, I mean, it's sensitive, it's secure, and there's a whole story behind the security, right? So let's go on to some of the later questions. What we have here, and then this was the question that we're on right now. The whole thing: why every gunshot victim should be able to drive a car. A statement says they should be able to drive a car because it's necessary for life nowadays. If they can't afford it, there's a way to afford it. People are on Social Security all the time. They can do all sorts of things, even if they're gunshot violent. You don't have to hide it. They can do a lot of things. You just have to be maybe tested for their motion ability in a way. But then what if the court's already said, hey, he's already been let go. He was so we have a piece of paper saying he's been let go. He don't have this problem anymore. There's no more court review. And then the amigo says, like, we need that now. And you're kind of like, yeah. But then what if you page that idea and say, actually that doctor works here and he ignored the gunshot wound victim. You yell at them or talk to them in a stern voice and say, would that be different? The guy comes up to you and he's like, I'll grab you from the collar and says, no, it won't be different. And you're kind of like, you don't really know much about these gunshot victims. And then you press yourself and okay, if that's true and correct, I must be a doctor from another country with an honorary doctorate from another country. And that's flipping me out, and that's crazy. Right? Or the next guy over said, like, I heard you cuss in front of my child, and I didn't need you to cuss in front of my child. You're kind of like, okay. Like, you're like, it's been the first 4 or 5 minutes going to the grocery store. I don't need that joke no more. Right. So, the principle there says, you walk it, you talk it, you sing in that song, you going in and out, and you're out of here. But the grocery store, the doctor, nobody will have it. Right. You go up to a doctor and say, hey, can you sign this just for the hell of it? I need to drive a car to get out of here. I've been doing this for a little while, but I need to get out of here. And they're like, no, I can't sign this. Your DOT, administer, and you say, no, I can't sign this. Or you go say, oh no, I can't sign that. Or you say, you go up to them and say, hey, can you sign this paper for my driving test? And you're like, no, I can't sign that. Or you go say, hey, I called this doctor up and said, hey, do you don't happen to know where a person might be able to get a liability, license, a doctor note from a doctor for driving a car? I'm like, I don't know where. So the ability there, it is a fortunate or disfortunate thing. So what you do good, and so what you could maybe save a life, or maybe you can't save a life, and maybe you could do something more important than save a life, and you save 2 lives, you save 3 lives, you save 4 lives. Does it matter? And you ask the question, can you sign this? I need to drive a license now. I don't think it would matter, really. The law is the law. The law is abiding, and the law is, it's real. It's supportive. It's a need in the community. So let's go on to the second or the last question out of the last. And does a gun for shot victim deserve a voice and be able to talk? Right. Human slave, not always able to talk. Human imperative, somebody you don't like very much, they shouldn't be able to talk, but it should be maybe you brought the surroundings. Maybe, I mean, if it was that important, life or death, maybe it was gunshot victim, it's a gunshot victim, or it's elusive. The person behind the idea of the pad and the doctor pad says, forget about it. You're a dead man. Or forget about it. You're a dead man, type 2. Or they say, oh no, you have a suffice reason to die now. Or they say, oh no, even though you experienced what you experienced, and it might have been on the hook or off the hook at the time. No, I'm not doing it. So the suffice to say is, there is no ability in the human mind to say, someone shouldn't have a voice based on that, or they shouldn't be able to talk based on that. Not necessarily. There's a generality behind it. So, like, let's say you're an informant, you go up to a doctor and say, "Hey, I need a driver license, evaluation. I need the evaluation for the doctor's license," and they say, "No, I'm not going to do that for you," mostly because I don't have to tell you. Right. So the ability there, being a gunshot victim or being an informant or being, within the real life congressional or real life peace thoughts or real life ideas or about safekeeping, community awareness, support for life. Right. So they should have a voice. They should have a voice in any congressional thought. They should have a voice and be able to talk on anything, right? So that begs the question: should anybody be able to do anything, legal? Should they be able to vote? Should they be able to, drive cars? Should they be able to understand or comprehending the data behind those things? Should that be a question, right? So should you be a slave? I mean, if you're a prisoner and or you left someone for dead, maybe in a military coup, would you be able to have the right to vote, right? If you were in a coup that murdered people, or if you were just, I guess, a murderer, should you be able to vote? I mean, I probably think they'd say no, right? But the ability to be a gunshot survivor, to be in the system or not in the system, and say, hey, I was a gunshot survivor. I like you to sign this. And they say, oh, talk to this person. This is a court reporter. And they said, if you don't report the right information, I'm going to take you away. Right. So the question there says, okay, you should have a voice. You should be able to talk, but the gunshot victim should be able to do whatever they want now. Or should they be a human slave? Should they be able to question the idea of what is right, what is wrong, or the ability to make a choice for themselves? Should they have a reaction and action? Is that enough for them to devise a way? Are they frequently paralyzed, right? Or do they do so much exercise they're no longer paralyzed? Right? Do they do so much exercise? It doesn't really matter. But the principle of the thing or the idea is, they're a gunshot survivor. They don't get everything and all the rights you have, right? So, what does that message say to you? What does it mean to be a gunshot survivor wanting to drive a car? What does it mean to ask a question about driving a car? What does it mean to do all of that? So, let's go over the checklist one more at a time, and that'll be up. Right? So, no gunshot victim should be left for dead. Yes, no gunshot victim should be left for dead. No gunshot victim should be left alone. And we're doing these numbers in basic terminology as like a basic emotional test, right? Or emotional assessment, right? Like emotional realization that this is being made. It's a gunshot victim ability to drive assessment. No gunshot victim should be left alone. True and false. So 1 and 0. And we can mark this as positive or negative skill assessment. So, okay, so we'll put 1 there for no gunshot victim should be left for dead. No gunshot victim should be left alone. So we put a reprise of 1 and 0 there, the initiation or the non-initiation. So we'll put a 1 plus a factor of the balance of equivocal. So we'll put 0.5. I guess. I mean, that's safe, right? So maybe I can screenshot my my screen. Okay, so allow it. Let's see if I can find it. My window. Oh, here's my notes right here. Okay, so no gunshot victim. So we have these right here. No gunshot victim should be left alone for dead. And this is exactly how a psychological associate go. As you see, the 0 right now. There was 4 views before. So every gunshot victim should have a crime scene. So we'll put 1 plus 2 because it's a scenario-based reason. It means that it could be negative, it could be positive, but it's also cognitive. So there's a reality behind human rights, human sophistication, choices, emotions. And you put a 3 there as well, but I think that would be didactic as well. Like maybe a doctor would take care of something like that. Every gunshot victim should have fair rights, and we could put a 1. And we'll put a 5 there as a significant figure because it counts for about 4 out of the 5 figures, in which are, low bang, emotional intelligence, openness, conceitedness, and they're all reasons to live, like kind of like the big 5 would be. And that attestment would be, an image, and then also it would be, what is coming up, which is maybe the reaction or a double scenario, double negative maybe, or something like that. Bringing the question of, if it's negative, it's negative. So every gang shot victim should be saved. Maybe no, because there are bad guys in the world, and we can put, there's both negative, but we put -2 as a ratio, and we'll put +1 as a estimation, because if it's an estimation, there's no question or effort behind the conscience or the connectiveness of the gunshot victim. Kind of like saying there's a bad guy and there's saying a good guy involved. Every gunshot victim should be saved, right? So that's as straight as a point, instead of saying there's a negative consonant or cognitive balance, or reactive one, right? So reactive one meaning there's hiding a bigger reason for something that is non-conscience. No one should celebrate a gunshot victim's grave or crime scene. That's a big negative, I would think. But the positive reaction would also be improved, or be impartial. So you might say it's negative in impartiality, but nothing like that. It would be maybe something that is fractional, maybe. I mean, we could put like maybe a negative correlation, but that negative correlation would also be, kind of decimated. It wouldn't be a reason. It would just be a focus. It would be in the way. So maybe as something would be hypothetical in a way, it would be primitive. It would be a real. It would be a balancing effort. Technically, it would be a balancing effort. So let's score it as 3, because that is the most sophisticated, because it is positive and therefore a prime for reality, the ego, and the choice. No gunshot victim should experience violence again. And we'll put 2 or quartile. So the 2, if it's a quartile, being +2 and the -2, I think it would be exponential, but the exponential reason would be systematic. So therefore we count it as 1 each. So it'd be 2. But the novice technically could be treated as 3, but I mean, there's no proof that it should be non-violence. Again, no gunshot victim should be experiencing violence again. It doesn't say that every gunshot violent is every gunshot violent. So let's put 2. It's erratic, and I don't think there's a range for saying negative people have the negative range, but it does mean that they're able to get away with a hypothetical emotional state better. Every gunshot victim should have a lawyer. I think we can easily put an imperative there. The imperative would be, like the exponential or the reason to exist. I think that's kind of like dharma would be, or dogma, but the principle there would be, solicitations would be 1. But the lawyer principle would be also imperative. So it's been proved that imperative is openly, negative, but the reality there is that it's sophisticated, so that means it can be caught in its tracks of a gunshot victim. So a negative estimation, or positive one, or just one with reality, maybe just add them up. So I mean, that would be like a process of 1 plus -6 plus 7. So it's like kind of 1 plus 1. So maybe 2. Let's see, and that would be 2, right? So -6, that's 2. So we could do 2, I guess. But I think the imperative there is also resourceful, as they put it. Is 2 might just not count as anything. 2, absolute 2, it would be 1 plus 1. In such a gunshot violence versus with imperative again. So gunshot violence versus a scenario. So but then there's a realization, there's the effort of the echoes of the gunshot violence, everything elope bang. We'll just put 2 right there. The elope will be functional. Then. Every gunshot victim should be raped. I would put an imperative. So the particulars of that would be about de-escalation, escalation, and then the value of an integer that might be positive. So I don't think it would necessarily count a positive integer unless it was a whole number. And I don't believe you would count a recreation behind that without it being domicile, right? So you would probably put, the domicile, as like, a child, or as the interment of, escalation. And we can look at, the taxation of a child in birth, that's 8 months, divided by 10, I guess, or divided by 1. So let's grab the calculator here. 8 divided by 1. Oh, I'm sorry. 1 divided by 8, and that's 0.125. So I guess you can count a whole life as an eighth as a reaction, but the reaction would also be domicile. So let's try 2 or 1 of eighth. We'll try 1 of eighth, 1 divided by 8. 1 divided by 8, divided by flip. Okay. Divided by 1, maybe? Did I do that wrong? Divided by 1. I think just divided by 1. So, all right, so 0.1 divided by 0.10125, that's 8. No, that wouldn't be it. Okay. Point zero. Okay, no, that would have to be another eighth again. So let's see. 1 divided by 8 is 1 month in of the gestation. So I mean, that probably wouldn't necessarily matter, or matter as it is past gestation. So I mean, 3 of 8, I guess. And that's 0.375. So we could look at, that's quartile. So that's about 0.4. But also 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 would also be meeting the gestation period. So, I mean, technically it'd be topical. So it'd be 1. Maybe standard deviation 2. But I mean, I would say 1 is choice, action, reason, gunshot victim. 2 would be raped, or not raped. It would be the deviation of just 2 in general, as though it is having to do with the practice of this conceitedness, which is rapid killing. I mean, have to be killing, I would think, but I mean, I'm not one to agree or not to agree. So I will put, gosh, this is a difficult one. Maybe gestation. I mean, 3 months into it. Why not more? Why not less? So there's an odd and even there. So it's successive. It's not a functional word, but it should be counted without it being private. I mean, if it was private, it would have an even stake. So I think the process would be about developing not half of something, but of a whole of something. So, I mean, every gunshot victim should not be raped, should be systematic. I mean, it's logarithmic also. So, I mean, the principle there is imperative, yeah, but not divisional. It's implied or imperative. So it's also domicile. So I mean, it has consistence of 2 logs, 2 functions of the reality, but also has the escalation of like 2 people, a 2-figure thing. So 4. That's a quick question. Quid pro quo. Should you have a relationship between these odds? I don't think you should. It's normal. But the imperative there is also a reason of sanity. Woman isn't counted as proportion. I don't know. As a negative, interlope also, it just might be the skill level of the test itself. But the skill level of the test itself, there's no hyperbole. So the reality there says it's scored. It's a sheet. It's its own documicile. I mean, these are weird words, but reality between them. So it's high assessment, high risk, but it's actually low risk because these are all low risk crimes. But the reality are, it is a logarithm. It is a factored logarithm. So, why not the most basic, which is one, right? I mean, if all else, it should be one, but the domicile reason is that it is dependent on the need for that factor function. So it's not fleeting, it's not recreational, it's kind of like a median would be. So maybe indeed 1.5, as it is a recreational supportive need, but is also functional. So maybe that is a supported reason all by itself, or it's that it's demanding and then creating a tail to the envision or the median itself. So I think I would be safe to say 1.5 here. As a quartile would be, lower or higher, but then it would be riskier, or the assessment would be domicile. I mean, it would be counterproductive because it would not be compared to, a loop or an essay in calculus, right? So every gunshot victim should be offered a deal. Oh, I think that one's pretty crazy. I think the assessment, I'm going to put 6 here. As a segmented reality, there are about so many things you can do as a human, and I think they're all counterproductive in the situation, except chemical demand or mediation between your reality and then the escalation. I'm not trying to be funny or something, but the reality there is we are working with numbers that have never been seen before, heard before. There are risk assessments that are not real in life, and this one pretty much is not real in life, but it is reliable, however. And then also the demand there for that exact question is also responded, right? So you are able to do this no matter what, right? So every gunshot victim, let's go to the next one. Every gunshot victim should be left financially reliable or have freedom financially. I would say, as the math goes, the United States law goes, I mean, this isn't really a question. I mean, you can't even get EBT stamps, anymore if you're doing certain things, or if you're domicile like that. I mean, that's a word. And gunshot victims, I mean, they might be late on utilities. There might be victim assistance a little bit, but from victim assistance, I can see it has to be about the association of the gunshot victim, or I think it might just be if you're seeing somebody dead. No, it's funny, but the victimization there is it now domicile as a recreational reaction. The victim should be small now. I mean, now it's correspondent with social matters. So, I mean, the question there is systematic. Yeah, the arpeggio is systematic. So, I mean, it's typo. It's like as it would be in a paro, like it's dependent, it's mapped, it's needed. But is the ratio real, or is the real ratio the nation's needs, right, or the community's needs, as they put it, or community balance? I don't know what it'd be considered, but I think the reaction could be 4. I think the reaction would be separate as a paro, but the system as well could be number 2. I mean, it is defined based on needs and wants. So I think that imperative can follow about anything, but the reaction or relationship there is based on quartile system again. Somewhat, but if it's not that and it's imperative, then I think 4 is quality of concern. Quality is concern as a nature versus a not evolution, but a stance of normal dependence versus independence versus the normalcy of frequency of the numbers, and the normalcy, which is normal means, odds, potential again is based on the faction. So I think number 4 would be good there financially. You are lost in the let me consider gear, or the reality of the technology, and you have flown through as a flat figurative notion. So let's look at the next one. Every gunshot victim should be able to drive a car. I think the novice there is a docile principle, as it is data looping logarithm. So before logarithms took place, you look at not domicile like e primes, because it's one system versus the other, like a sea versus the sky versus land. You're looking at 1/10, 0.10 of that, but as looking glass goes, you're looking at the metering or relationship between certain things. So the potential there is honesty. It's about domicile thought again, and I think we figured something out here. So we could put the novice is 1/10, or the reaction or relationship, something like 1/23, the hours of the day almost, right? So the principle there is kind of a relationship of interlope, which is like a spectrometer of the color red. If you only had one red pixel on a computer, you'd have one red pixel. You have one concept, you don't really have anything at all. It's not a missionable ethic. But if you have one domicile timestamp, you have one reason to create a functionable existence. That may be a log or dislog versus dislog. It might be a positive and negative conceptive reasons, but it also might be an explanation of a product versus a code or something like that. Like, remembrance versus, future, which is, again, future is always zero because it is a hesitation, or if it's one, it's a relationship. So statistically, you might consider the quartile again, but you might consider systematic improvement. Every person with a gunshot wound should drive a car. Everyone should be unfinished in a way. They should be left alone sometimes. They should be in a relationship to have exponential means for their own focus as a humanity type effort only, right? Their means should only be relationship towards being supportive of the community, not being addicted to drugs, doing certain things that don't make sense. Having nothing is one of those things. They need help, and as people, we need to help people. The dominant cell you need for relationships between negativity and that. I mean, are all vehicles negative in a way? I mean, kind of. In a way. So the question is, not the principle of the dominant cell feature. It's about, how reactive the car could be, right? I mean, car itself is already a negative entity. It does only consume energy. It is only a consumer of energy, and it is only dominant style. So, as a imperative or a lifestyle, I mean, you can only have the mountability of quartiles that are built on fashionable compromise, right? So we're going with the 9/10 then. If it's 1/10, it's 9/10. So why don't we add those up? So plus 9/10 plus 3/4 plus 6/7, and then plus 8/9, and those quartiles are all functions. But the remembrances are is there a half? No. Is there a 1/3? No. Is there 2/3? In a monopoly, 1/2/3. Yeah. 2/3/4 plus 6/7/8/9, and then 10/10/11, and that's constipated or constipulated logarithms. So I think that's about what I can see there. And then the escalation wouldn't really need to be built on a binary, as the binary is kind of using the same system. So let's compute that real quick. So 1 divided by 10 equals 0.1 plus 9/10, that's 0.9 plus 3/4, that's 0.75 plus 6/7. Oh, I'm sorry, 6/7. That's 6/7. 6 divided by 7. That's a whole or a rational number. That's an irrational number. I'll go to the 4, I guess. 0.857. Oh, I'm sorry, 857 1428. I'll go to that one. Propose or 857. That sounds like almost German almost. Plus 8/9. 8 divided by 9. The scenario is still infinite. 0.8888. Plus okay, and then we go for the bigger numbers. 2 divided by 3 divided by 4. and that is 0.1 infinite, and then 6. Okay, and then plus 6 divided by 7 divided by 8 divided by 9. This is like the escalation test. I think this is what they use at bigger businesses, corporations. 6, 7, 8, 9, kind of like the World Mall in Minnesota. And then that goes this array, hallucination 0, 1, 1, 9, 0, 4, and also equipment uses this. Escalators, 1, 9. Okay. That was way too many numbers, but okay, let's go to the next one. That's 10 divided by 10 divided by 11. 10 divided by 10 divided by 11. And that's a escalation order. 0. Point 0 9 0 9 0 9 0 9 0 9 grouped essay array. Okay, so I think that's how it works. 10 divided by 11 is the same. Yeah, 10 divided by 11 is the same. But it does not just round there. It keeps on going on. 0%. It keeps on. It doesn't. So let's go to the next one here, and let's actually add that up right now. All right, so let's see. 0.1 plus 0.9 plus 0.75 plus 0.85714 to 8 857 plus 0.888888 plus 0.1666666 plus 0.011904 7619 plus 0.09090909. Okay, we'll add it up, and then we get an open what they call IMD or IMDb. I don't know why, but okay. A channel or a gate 3.76551211755. Okay, even if it was coincidental in some weird way. Okay, so the common style of that is like a script, right? Or what they used to be considered a script on a bottle. You wrap it up, and it is okay. So this is an old system versus a new system. So that's a big fact. So like old system versus new system in pharmacy goods and medicine. We'll put gate. Wrapped, we'll put quote on there, wrapped as in new goods system. And then we found out something there, as though it is a relationship there, shares relationship that is different than new medical imperative or focus. Okay. So we get the last one here, voice and talk. So as the trilogy goes, voice and talk, human emotion. I think, usually the score is 5, no matter what. A setting is usually scored as a 1. For some systems, for not all systems. Imperative, maybe scored as a 2, but I mean, it shares a relationship. Ego, consciousness, validity, you share different ones. 3, 4, 5. So, I mean, what are those numbers? Let's check. 1 divided by 3, or 1 divided by 1. 1 divided by 2, divided by 3, divided by 4, divided by 5. That's 0.008. So that is 8%. Or 0.8%. So The documented case there is relationship to divisional thinking is standardized, right? So I mean, not really, because then therefore it could be used as a weapon. Very good, but also it could also be used to escalate a situation. So there's that. You'd have to find a way to reduce maybe without escalation. That's taught us something else as a way to produce it, but it also shows relationship with secure data versus insecure data versus the exhibition of looking at functions that are relatable. You're catching a mistaken error or catching reality a chance. Checking the memory like a counselor would do, seeing how they were doing in a way by saying your name, by saying like what a computational logic would be. Um, Teaching and learning though, voice and talk, can it be balanced at 5? Can you learn through self-talk, self-image through a novice of your own, but just the policy, right? 5 plus 5, I would say 5 plus 5. I mean that's 10 right there. The emotional state of your reaction, your disreaction, your emotional state of virtue, purpose, quality of life, reason to live. There's a whole lot going there for you. So emotional is revelation. I think that's enough right there to say 10 out of 10 right there. So I think the policy there is overhaul as a relationship is quality. And 5, a voice and talk, what would you engage it on? An engagement of positive, of, yours number. I mean, there's a lot there. The policy of a basis, though. That's important as well. Is there anything besides a basis, though? I mean, you could add 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 up. There's nothing wrong with that. What do you get there? You get the number 15, which is also a quartile, which is perfect, right? The quartile is perfect. Quartile is perfect because it accounts for every reaction. And that's improved science, except by multiplication. So, voice and talk at 15, or voice and talk at 10. As a basis for the quartile system, you should always have a deviation, which it always should be deviation. But as the quartile speaks, it is always a segment. The quartile should always be Q1. What do I know about mass shootings? What do I know about gunshot victims? They also don't have basis. All of them are looped at N0P or N0V, N0VA, which means they are faulted, curved, or they're reactionary, meaning they're segmented, skipping. You're skipping it. Yeah. So, quartile 1 is not saying nothing about anything, but what if it's quartile 2 and it says it's function and frequency? Function, you already know it's control over information or interstake and stake. Also a loping. So if you have quartile 1, would it be a loping? Quartile 1 is demediated, so 1 plus 3 is 4. Also, know it's demediated. So the quartile there is related towards the gunshot victim. So it's questioning the fact, is the gunshot victim count as a quartile of dead? Just like we were talking before. Change the numbers up. You look at 2, 3 plus 5. I mean, you're looking at 8 then. I mean, the ratios are basically subjective, right? I mean, their basis is finding a way to count down to something which is subliminal in a way. Whew, that's a difficult one right there. And time is, on their side, but is also imperative towards fitting things together that cannot fit together, right? So, the voice and talk situation is also comparative to just nothing at one, right? It would outchart the system in about every single way. There would be no way to create a domicile reaction without a force. Without that force, even if it's quartile, it would have a novice. So we can put novice as a entropy word. And I don't, disagree with the idea that it should be a set of a quartile. 15 is, perfect, right? The 15 is also demediated. So, let's say you had the demediated effect but then you have the needed unity or the aversion. So I mean, it could be negative, right? So 20 domicile as a unit versus the novice of a quartile. So that's an exchange of 20 minus 15, which would make it -5 as a repose of one connection or one interloping curve, right? So the interloping curve would also be negative, but it would also show that domicile as a unit would be technically breakable only if it was domicile versus charted, right? Domicile versus functional through the limit of limancy or reaction of limancy, which positive and negative, it would be about escalation or computability of anything that is within the ratio. Yeah, no. And that's opposing, but then that's also subtractive itself as a philosophical ethical toolkit. The reaction or relationship that would be 0 versus 1. So the domicile outlook would be negative, but the outlook there would be charted as a proposed reprimand, remand. There's nothing remand, but there's nothing wrong with quartile itself, as it's functional. As we are counting, the quartile system itself. So we can call 15, or we can count around 10, right? So 15, 10, or 5. Squirrel says the max is the best limit or the minimum limit. So it is also very important there, as the fixture or the relationship should show a basis for something, not just a base. So we'll put novice is 15 there. And the subtractive force could be a relationship of the time itself, but that would be -3, but then the relationship wouldn't have any set stone. So we would quartile 4 and the reprise of something like 11, but I mean that's not countable at all. So I mean, if it says as novice as it could be through choice, maybe 5 is the answer, but the relationship there is still scored. So the basis of a novice, agreement, reaction, would you remember it though? I don't think you would. Udatory. I mean, it would be based on emotions, true development, like communist government would be, or equipped relationships. I mean, the voice and talk, if it's not 5, it'd be a solution, which is like, the imperative, the change, which would be the 6th degree. So I think we can go. So the novice is scratch, but is also a congruent, focus there, which would be 6 for the focus of that, and 6 is just fine, as the novice is a choice. There's a setting, and the setting, and according to Noslos, it would be relationship. We share relationship or relationship style, manifesto, or ethic, micro, or mini skills, right? So it would shatter, it would be imperative. So I think 6 is a good one. And the reaction or relationship would be efficient there. So let's look at adding these up. So we got 1. Let me clear my calculator altogether. Blah 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 blah. 1 plus 1.5 plus 3 plus 6 minus 1. Fortunately, minus 1. No gunshot victim should celebrate on a gunshot victim's grave. I mean, technically, we're talking about the military here. Pure death. And we're also talking about animals. I mean, that's pure death. I'm afraid so. So we talk about no one should celebrate on a gunshot victim's grave or scene. Obviously, we love it. Number 3, unfortunately, it's low. It's imperative. It's an ethical question. We look at no gunshot victim should experience violence again. Obviously, separation of ego and sense, but that's the way the law works nowadays. And we've talked about almost 2 hours about that, 2 hours and 3 minutes now. So -1. 3, violence again 2, traditional lawyer 2. That's imperative. Advocacy versus your response. Every gunshot victim should be raped. Imperative. Wow, that's a crazy one, but as a focus and frequency, you got around it. Every gunshot victim should get offered a deal. Maybe 6 on that one, as the embargo or the ego says, it's the same as self-reflection, right? Every gunshot victim should be left financially liable or have a freedom financially. That's a tough one, but it's a reality of choice, effort, ethic, and concern. What you say is real, but what you say can also change, right? So then we got this odd one out. Old system versus new system. Why every gunshot victim should be able to drive a car. Oh, so it's very similar in fashion towards financial reality, right? So we're figuring something out there as well. 3.7. So we're showing you hit the bottle, but maybe we did something else. 3.7, 655, 121, 755. I think that's the number. Okay. And then in voice and talk. And then we'll show you the number we got here. Okay. So the score here is 38. Boy, it looks like somebody had already counted already. Crazy. 38.76, 55, 121, 755. And that was the number there. Does it mean anything? Does a choice mean anything? Does imperative mean anything? Would you divide it by the number of focuses and functions here? I guess let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13 divided by that. Divided by that by 13. And you come up with a exponential mean of 2.9819 62 4750 385 deviated mean. So let's look at divided by that one. 3 divided by 3. And I'm sure we could look at this in a stats way. We could probably plug it into a computer somehow. Oh, and even by 13. My apologies, by 13. 13. Okay. Let's see if I could do that one. Oh, that's the same one. Yeah. Okay. 2. That was weird. I didn't really understand that, but okay. 2.982. Okay, so it's imperative, it's functional. If it shares the same relationship and is a median mode, so we can write that one down. Median mode, shared tail, I guess. Probably spelled that wrong. Oh no, I spelled that wrong. And then exponential mean. Exponential mean slash modes share fair. I don't know if these are words, but it also actually share fair. Let's write that one down. Share fair, kind of like a script would be, and a microscope would be share fair. Microscope. Then could it have to do with blood? I don't know. I mean, any opes of blood. Would it have something to do with that? It's Fisher quartile. So I mean, every system here says it's positive. Everyone says it's reactive in a time frame. So I mean, we're looking at computer systems. Maybe apply systematic Euler's number to it or something constructive, criticism to it. I mean, there's not a lot you would be able to do with it except look at the exact modes of each relationship and kind of tune it in and say, hey, ChatGPT, fix this. But the relationship is it's a gunshot victim. Should they be able to drive, and should that be the test? You drive or you publish on ResearchGate. I mean, yeah or no, it's novice, maybe. It might be fictional in some sort of way, but the relationship there is, again, it's not just novice, it's about something much more. So I think that's it for the video tonight, or today, or whenever you're watching. And that was the test we could solve, and one portion of it: should gunshot victims be able to drive a car? Thank you.